The Georgia Bulldogs will be visiting Bryant-Denny Stadium at Alabama. Georgia is a 2.5-point favorite. Over under is set at 54.5. The much awaited, much anticipated contest between Georgia and Alabama. We thought a couple of years ago, whenever we circled this matchup, that it would be another Kirby, versus Nick Saban matchup, and to our surprise, last year we figure out that, of course, Nick Saban decides to retire, and Kalen DeBoer comes in from Washington, a really accomplished coach, very few losses even on his record as a college football coach, and he inherits a Alabama team that, you could honestly say this about just about any team that they go against year in and year out, but Alabama's kind of owned Georgia over the last few years, Mason, and as a Georgia Bulldog fan myself, it's, I hate it just as much as anybody, but, minus the 2021 national championship, Alabama has owned Georgia, and Georgia's got to go to their place, and Georgia's coming off of a game with Kentucky where things just didn't look so good, man. And the offense specifically, the defense did what they needed to do, but the offense just totally left the team out to dry, and Georgia's able to pick up the pieces and somehow pull out a 1-point victory there in Lexington. And we've seen kind of the same stuff from Alabama this year already with South Florida. We saw Alabama kind of playing with their food with a 1-point lead in the fourth quarter, and finally turn the NOS switch on there, and hit that passing gear and figured out a way to hit some explosives and win that ball game by more points than what actually the game, how it actually worked out. I mean, South Florida really was right where they wanted to be in this football game. So I feel like both teams have kind of showed some weaknesses. I think we both know, and everybody watching knows, the talent prowess that both of these teams have. These are some of the most talented football teams in America as far as colleges go, and just NFL talent everywhere. And I think first and foremost, I think it's going to be a really, really good football game. The line is Georgia 2.5. We've seen all the way up to Georgia 4.5, which is, I have to say, Mason, a little bit surprising to me. What do you think about the line on this one? And what are some of the areas of contention that you're fighting with yourself in your head about? Because that's what I'm doing in my head. I'm thinking, I don't know if I'll actually bet this one in person, just because of the fact that I don't know what's going to happen here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, to this point in the season, can you name a matchup that we've broken down that has been like so even? I don't know that there has been so far. I'm trying to think back. I mean, let us know in the comments if there's been a closer game in your eyes going into the game. I mean, obviously we've seen some close ball games, but to me, when I break these two teams down, they're actually pretty similar in some ways. That these are two defensive led football teams at this point in the season, and two offenses that have popped at certain points, and have looked pretty lackluster in others. For Georgia, it's really only been, it's basically been Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. For 6 quarters out of the 12 that they've played so far, Georgia has looked really good on offense. For the other 6, they have not looked good, including a full game against Kentucky. Now, you compare that to Alabama, they've probably looked better on offense for more quarters, but with Alabama, they are coming off of a complete game against Wisconsin at Wisconsin, and a game that they really just looked really good on offense. When you look at the stat lines, now when you watch the game that they played against Wisconsin, you kind of notice some stalling. Right, you see some drives, you see some punts and things like that. But whenever they needed to, they made the explosive play happen, and that's where these two offenses are a little bit different. Georgia, outside of the half against Clemson, really hasn't had explosive plays on the offensive side of the football. They haven't been able to find them. The offensive line is not as good as we thought that they were, and I don't see a way that they kind of turn this around from what they've looked like, particularly the left tackle spot. I don't see them turning it around from what they've looked like all season, really, at this point, to a Joe Moore Award finalist like they were expected to be going into the season. I mean, the offensive line was supposed to be the leading group, the leading unit on this entire football team, and they're not playing like it. They're actually kind of hindering their performance a pretty good bit. So to me, that's kind of a big question mark. Alabama's offensive line, I think, is playing much better than Georgia's at this point in the season. Tyler Booker might be the best offensive lineman in the country, playing on the interior of that offensive line. And someone else who you may compare between Tyler Booker and Tate Ratledge for Georgia. Tate Ratledge isn't going to play in this football game as an interior offensive lineman, and he was certainly the leader on the Georgia offensive line. So you look at that and you say, well, yeah, Alabama's got a little bit of an edge there on the offensive side of the trenches. Move to the defensive side of the trenches, and I think Alabama's got the edge there as well. Georgia has been hampered on the interior of their defensive line and the end position, if you still include Michael in that edge position, I kind of think of him as an outside linebacker this year, but nonetheless, he's been hurt. We don't know if he's coming back. Warren Brinson has been hurt on the interior of the defensive line for Georgia. We don't know his status. Jordan Hall broke his leg in the preseason. Doesn't sound like he's going to be able to go. I mean, they've been really hampered this season so far on the defensive line. And so to me, I mean, I'm looking at Alabama and saying, yeah, they've got an edge on both sides of the trenches here in this football game. Now, as you kind of spread out a little bit, you look at the wide receiver room. Like, let's start with the wide receiver rooms and kind of compare the two there. I think Georgia has the edge when it comes to just the depth of the whole wide receiving room, but Alabama's got the edge when it comes to top end talent. Particularly with Ryan Williams. He's been playing really well. Jeremy Bernard has been playing really well, whereas Georgia is kind of winning by committee. So to me, that's a bit of a wash. I think you've got the more explosive players for Alabama, but maybe some players that can win on third down. A little bit more for Georgia and win some short routes and things like that. Couple that with the tight end play. If we want to throw them in there, I think Georgia's got the edge in the tight end room. But then you look at the backfield, and this is where it gets pretty scary to me when you're comparing the Alabama offense versus the Georgia offense. Alabama's tailbacks are healthy, and they're really, really good. Jam Miller is one of the best running backs in the SEC, and he's the second best running back on this team. Justice Haynes is playing like everybody expected him to in just his second season as a running back. I think that he's going to eat in this game. Georgia has not been able to stop the run very well so far this season. Kentucky ran all over Georgia, and if you're asking me to compare Kentucky's offensive line to Alabama's, I'm taking Alabama's. So to me, like, the running game is where this could get out of hand for Georgia. If they're not able to do something to plug some holes or get some players back and contain better, they really lost containment against Kentucky a lot. I think that this could be a long game for Georgia. Before I go any further, Mark, I'm gonna take a break, give you a chance to talk. What do you think about? I guess so far I've talked about the trenches and the running game, wide receivers. Where are you at on all this?
Man, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, man. I don't have a ton to add to that. You said that Georgia. The one thing that I agree with you, but one thing that I will kind of stand up and say, you said Georgia's got the edge in the tight end room. Mason, I'm really disappointed in these tight ends. I'm just going to be honest with you. I mean, Benjamin Jurasic, we've probably seen the last of him, because I'm going to tell you something. You don't play tight end at Georgia if you can't block. And he
struggled.
Block. That dude can't block. I mean, he was flat out. I mean, I'm being for real. It looked like me trying to go out there and block somebody. I know I would look like a complete dumbass. Well, He did too. He looked like a complete dumbass out there. Kentucky was just running right around him. Right around him. He don't need to be back out on the field. I don't care how good his hands are. I don't care unless we get wide receivers hurt and he's like in the slot or something. You can't line this guy up on the line, dude. There's just no way. I mean, we're doing a little swing and screen passes out here to the side, and he can't. He's the one block that the whole play revolves around, and he's missing the block. I don't know if he was really nervous. I think he might have been really nervous in that situation there. That was a loud crowd at Kentucky. Everybody was all into that football game, especially the longer they were in the game, the louder it got. Benjamin Urosek probably is used to playing in front of 10,000 people. You know what I'm saying? Not closer to 10,000 than 100,000, that's for sure. So, and then Oscar Delp, if they haven't put him on the back of a milk carton, then you need to go ahead and do so. Put out an APB or whatever. What's the deal? Brock Bowers Jr., my ass. This guy hasn't looked anything like that. So I don't know, man. I don't like the tight end room near as much as what I thought I would. Georgia has no wide receiver one. They've got a bunch of wide receiver twos. There's no first round talent. Look, I'm a Georgia fan, guys, so I hate to. I'm trying not to sit here and unload on my team here, and I'm really not taking a ton from the Kentucky game. I'm really not, because I've seen Georgia do this with teams like Missouri, Kentucky. Go look at some of the scores over the last few years. Look in 21 and 22 when Georgia won national championships. They did this with Missouri and Kentucky. So I'm really not taking a whole lot from that game other than the fact that Tate Ratledge was hurt and our offensive line couldn't block anybody. That was a good Kentucky defensive line. I think it'll be comparable to what we're going to see against Alabama. But if Georgia's offensive line plays at the level they did against Kentucky, there's zero doubt about it that Alabama will mop the floor with Georgia. This coming up weekend. And what you said about Alabama and how they score with the pot plays, but I don't think that's the only way that they can score. I think that you're going to get the very best version of Alabama in this football game. Seems like at the end of the South Florida game they figured it out, and then Wisconsin they had it rolling. Seems like they're the team that has the momentum. And sometimes when you're a team that has momentum, you say, "Well, dadgummit, I wish we didn't have a bye week this week." And I feel like this is probably one of those weeks for Alabama where they're saying, "I wish we could have just played Georgia this week." But with all that being said, both teams are going to try to do the same thing. They're going to try to make the other one-dimensional. They're going to try to take away the run game and make the other one-dimensional. And that's football, right? But
right.
I think Alabama, they kind of make themselves one-dimensional in a sense. You know what they've got coming. You know they're going to run the football, and you still can't stop it. And I don't see the first, or really, to be quite frank with you, second-round talent on the Georgia's defensive line that's going to be able to stop this Alabama offense consistently.
Yeah.
So I'm worried for Georgia.
And that's where I'll push back a little bit. I think that the game plan is a little bit different for these offenses, for Georgia and Alabama. Alabama has an advantage in the run game. Georgia, I don't think, has an advantage in the run game, but I do think that there's a clear advantage in the passing game. Nobody's been able to exploit these young DBs yet so far this season. And if Carson Beck
You're
plays
all
like,
going to hear that all week next week.
Absolutely.
This is what you're going to hear right here.
Absolutely. And you have to test that. I mean, if you're Kirby looking at this game, that has to be what you're thinking, right? I mean, when you look at it, you say, hey, we're not running the ball all that well, at least not early in the football games. We're going to have to take some deep shots, which we haven't done all year. You kind of wonder if the game plan has been to play a little bit vanilla the first 3 weeks, unless you had to against Clemson, which you kind of did in that second half, and we saw Georgia open the playbook up a good bit. Play a little bit vanilla, don't show anything too much, and then come Alabama, it's time to open it up a little bit. Georgia's got 4 games on their schedule this year that they have to really they're going to have to dig into their pocket and dig into their bag a little bit, pull out the driver every once in a while. And I think that this is definitely one of them. And I think that you will see an uptick in the passing plays and in passing plays that are 20 plus yards down the field in this game. And also, you were talking about the tight ends earlier. They have been quiet, right? Maybe it's the calm before the storm for the tight ends. I'm not saying that the tight ends are gonna combine for 150 yards or anything like that, but I do think that they get a little bit more creative with them this week or next week against Alabama, and I think that they're gonna test this secondary for Alabama, but all of that is mute if Georgia can't stop the run against Alabama, and then that's my biggest concern. If they're not going to stop the run against Alabama, then I don't care how good your secondary is, which Georgia has, I think, the best secondary in the country. I don't think it has shown quite yet, but with Janelle Aguero coming in to play the star now, and you can move Malachi Starks back to safety. Dan Jackson looks great. He's one of the leaders in tackles on the year, and when he's out, KJ Bolden steps in, and there's no drop off. The only concern on the secondary is really Dalen Everett at the cornerback position. To me, he's kind of been in position, but not had his head turned around, or something's a little bit off with him. Maybe a bye week does him right to kind of get straight and win some battles here, but. Going back to what I was saying, if Georgia's not going to stop the run, Jalen Milroe is going to have time to throw, right? You're going to have to add an extra body into the box. I don't love the matchup here for Georgia. I'm actually leaning Alabama for the most part at this point.
Let me ask you this, Mason, just real quick, just because it's on the same topic here. Do you think Georgia blitzes a little bit more in this football game? Or do you think
I think you have to.
I think you have to. Because, and here's the thing, you're not as worried about getting burned. Like, actually, I think you kind of invite it. Like, all right, if you burn us over the middle, so be it. But Jalen Milroe hasn't been able to do that. So Georgia has got to figure out a way to fabricate some type of pressure on him whenever he does drop back. Obviously, he's going to drop back at some point. I don't expect him to throw the ball 35 times in the game or anything. I suspect more like 25 or less attempts in the football game. I suspect that they'll be trying to throw it unless they get behind in the football game. That's very possible. But, yeah, I mean, I feel like if you're Georgia, you're less worried about what you're sacrificing on the back end just because of, I mean, you know what these wide receivers are. Ryan Williams is the main attraction. He's the one-trick pony as far as the wide receivers go. The rest of them are like, I said Georgia has a bunch of wide receiver twos. I think Alabama has a wide receiver one in Ryan Williams, and I think they got a bunch of wide receiver threes, is what I think. So, I feel like as long as you got safety help there with Ryan Williams and you know where he's at all times, I feel like you're able to probably send some pressure, something that we don't see Georgia do a whole heck of a lot. But this just seems like the tailor-made situation for it.
Well, against Kentucky, going back to this Alabama run game, against Kentucky, Georgia had 3 linemen that played 55 or more snaps in that football game. The next closest played 16 snaps. Georgia is depleted on the defensive line, and if they're being attacked, if Alabama is running the football decent in the first half, it's only going to snowball because Georgia this year just doesn't have the bodies on the defensive line, and really not any studs right now on the interior of the defensive line. I really like TID and what he's been able to do. He's got 5 tackles for a loss this year. That's one of the best in the country, but he has shown an inability to contain on the perimeter, and that's a concern. But pass rush, he's been excellent in Michael Williams' absence at the defensive end position. He's playing great. I don't know that there's a defensive lineman, if you want to call him that, in Jalen Walker. I don't know that there's one in the country that's having a better season rushing the passer this year. It's kind of interesting. We saw him wreaking havoc, specifically in the second half of that Kentucky game. But he's only got 1 quarterback hurry on the year. I don't really understand that. But when you watch him play, it seems like he is just taking over football games, and you'll see some of that this week against Alabama. But is he going to be enough? Is kind of my question. Is him and TID going to be enough? You got to get some pressure up the middle, and those guys on the interior have been getting whooped. If you're not going to do that, then yeah, you do need to blitz some linebackers straight up the middle there to stop the run, kind of sell out on the run a little bit. If you're going to have any success in this football game, if they're doing that, what's the counter? Is Jalen Milroe going to stand back and pass the ball? If that's the case, Georgia is still blitzing. Maybe the middle of the field is open, and at that point you're just kind of testing Milroe and saying, all right, are you gonna beat us over the middle of the field, because you haven't really shown a propensity to do that so far. Maybe that is the game plan. Maybe you see Georgia being a little bit more aggressive and showing some things that they haven't so far this year on the defensive side of the football. I think I feel confident in saying I know they're going to do that on the offensive side of the football. I think that they are going to reach into their bag quite a bit. I think Bobo opens the playbook up a pretty good bit, and this Georgia passing attack finally gets going against some young DBs for Alabama.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd be remiss though if we didn't talk about the linebackers for Alabama, so I'll mention them. Really, really good linebacker group. Um, Georgia, I really preseason sounds like I'm so down on my team. I guess I am in a way. It's not really as bad as I make it sound, but anyway, the running backs are not near as good as what I thought for Georgia, at least right now. I still, you got some young guys that I feel like are still trying to feel their way back. Some guys coming back from injury. It seems like ETN or nothing to me right now, especially in a game like this. We saw Nate Frazier come in the Kentucky game, and I heard several people say, well, why didn't we see more of Nate Frazier? And then he comes in the game, and immediately they blitz, and he doesn't pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, that's why Nate Frazier hasn't been in the football game, because they're blitzing their ass off, and he's not good at pass protection yet. And that's something that comes with years of experience. I mean, this guy spent the offseason trying to get the playbook and that type of stuff, much less protections and things. So it seems like ETN or nothing, which I think he is one hell of a playmaker, and I think he'll be Georgia's best running back in this football game, obviously. But it's going to be on his shoulders to make some moves and make some guys miss. And we saw him in the Kentucky game. I mean, if it wasn't for ETN, we'd probably lose that football game.
Yeah.
In all honesty, he literally was getting to the line. Nobody was blocked properly. He still made a miss. He's going sideways. He's jumping backward. He's doing whatever he can, man. And just kudos to that guy. It took max effort. And when he came off the field, we missed him. He went back to the locker room for a little bit there, and we certainly missed him. But I think we just got to figure out more ways to be able to get him the football. Not going to be able to run up the middle on Alabama. Going to have to catch the edges. Going to have to throw the ball out to the edges. And I know that I'm not telling Georgia anything that Mike Bobo doesn't already know.
Well, and I do want to mention, I did want to get this in on this show. We don't know about Roderick Robinson and whether or not he's going to be ready for this game. In the off season, he did have surgery to correct some turf toe. I'm assuming that they were hoping to get him back for this game. If you don't know who Roderick Robinson is, I don't blame you, but a big 6'2", 245-pound back that was doing some really good things in spring and fall camp for Georgia. He's a freaking bowling ball, y'all, and I think that Georgia is missing that. Whenever he does get healthy, if he's able to go and can finish the rest of the season healthy, I think that the Georgia offense looks a lot different, in particular in the running game. Got to have the blockers up front for sure, but I think that if Robinson's playing in this game, I really feel like there's a whole different outlook, because right now I think the other Branson Robinson's not really getting it done in between the tackles. And then you mentioned pass pro. Who better to if he's picking up the blitzes at least, who better to protect for you than a 245-pound running back who's blocking a 245-pound defensive end? Like you don't see that size at the running back position that much. I think that he could be a catalyst in this game if he's able to go, if he's not limited too much. That could be a huge advantage for Georgia in the run game and in pass protection.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. Um, Look, if Georgia's going to win this football game, they're going to have to play a really, really good game, obviously. But I think they're going to have to take advantage of a very, very young Alabama secondary. Georgia is a throw to win football team at this point. They're going to have to throw to open up the run. And we saw that a lot actually over the last couple of years for Georgia, so I know that they can do it. But the biggest question is going to be protecting Carson Beck, and with the tape that's out there now, why would you not blitz Carson Beck? I would send at least one extra if I was Alabama because you just watched Georgia not be able to defend it. You watch Georgia not be able to block it, I guess I should say. So I expect Alabama to be, breathing down Carson Beck's neck in this one, and we'll see how the Georgia offensive line responds after a really, really tough performance last week against Kentucky. And if you're a Georgia fan or Alabama fan, welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. If you're new here, we got Power 4 college football coverage wall to wall. We're not a Georgia show. We're not an Alabama show. We are Georgia fans. I root for Georgia. I'm die hard. But any game that Georgia's not playing, I'm just totally indifferent, and we're just trying to call it like we see it. And the show that we actually recorded this on today was our betting show on Thursdays that we do every single Thursday. So we're just big college football fans. We like to bet on the games. We like to get on here and talk, and we got a good little community going. So we hope that you'll consider subscribing and coming and hanging out with us and giving us your 2 cents in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you. As a Georgia Bulldog fan, I really hate to do it, but I got to take Alabama plus 2.5 here. I'm not. If Alabama was favored, I would take Georgia as the underdog in this one. I'm taking the underdog in this, and I don't know, man. I just don't see anybody running away with this football game. And with the troubles that Georgia's had on the line of scrimmage, we talk about it all the time on this channel. Who can win the line of scrimmage? That's who's probably going to win the football game. And I don't think Georgia is fully equipped to do that right now, just due to injuries and, just kind of in between. I feel like some playmakers on the defensive line. I know Georgia fans and Georgia recruiting staff and coaches are working on some really nice, talented players to come in over the next few years to play defensive line. But you had Jordan Davis come through Georgia. It was the anchor of that defense there in 21. Jalen Carter, helped, and he was the anchor in 22 there. And you just don't have that for Georgia right now. And I feel like they're going to miss it dearly in this football game, unfortunately. Give me Alabama plus 2.5. I hope that I am dead wrong. What do you think, Mason?
Yeah, I mean, from a betting perspective, I really like the under, but this isn't necessarily our betting show. This is a preview show, so I'm still going to pick against the spread. I do think Georgia covers. I think it's going to be an instant classic. Turnovers are. I think that Jalen Milroe has a pick or two in this football game against this secondary. That they're going to get into situations where they have to throw the football. I just don't see Georgia going into this football game not giving up a touchdown at this so far this year. I do think that they give up at least one against Alabama, but I feel like the defense is going to be prepared. They're going to have a game plan in this football game, and I think that turnovers are going to be what Georgia kind of wins it on. I could see Alabama out rushing Georgia by about 50 yards, but Georgia end up making up for it in the passing game. And like I said, getting the turnover, flipping the field, great special teams. I mean, it's going to be that type of football game here. But give me Georgia. I'm kind of just going with my gut here. I do feel like Alabama at this point in the season is the better football team, but I think Georgia finds a way to win it on the road in a big environment in Tuscaloosa and build some momentum heading into the tougher part of their schedule here in just a few weeks. They're going to be running through a gauntlet facing really, if you count Alabama, 4 of the top 5 teams in the country, in my opinion, going through Ole Miss, Texas, and Tennessee as well. But I think that they gain some momentum with this football game and find a way to win it late. This is going to be one of those games where the last drive is going to matter, in my opinion. And whoever executes on that last drive, whether it's defense or offense, I think that's going to be what decides the game. It's a pick 'em, in my opinion. I don't really think that Georgia should be favored necessarily, but I like Georgia to win the game. This is, again, more of a gut call than anything, related to statistics or players or matchups or anything like that. I like Alabama on the lines of scrimmage, but I think that Georgia has just a few more playmakers overall on the football field in this one, and they end up getting the win in Tuscaloosa, kind of breaking the curse against Alabama, and maybe that was a Saban curse and not so much an Alabama curse, but call it a homer pick, call it what you will, but I think that Georgia finds a way to win it and digs deep and, kind of gets the ball rolling here this season.
Yeah, and I just want to say, Georgia and Alabama fans, whoever wins this football game, it's going to look great on your resume. It's going to, mean a lot for the SEC. But whoever loses this football game, it really doesn't even matter that much.
Yeah.
I hate to say that. There's a 12-team playoff, and we're not used to that yet. It doesn't really matter that much. It may be the difference in you going to the SEC championship or not, but it's not going to have any bearing on whether these teams go to the playoff or not.
Yeah.
Like it, love it.
Whoever loses will have a quality loss, and that never really hurts anybody.
Exactly. As long as you don't get beat 50-0, I don't see either one of these teams doing that to one another. It's going to be a really good one. Can't wait. Georgia at Alabama. We'll be on pins and needles for that one.